I met Betty Dodson for the first time in 2007 when I called her to set up an interview for a podcast that I had been producing in iTunes. I had interviewed people in the adult industry. I had interviewed people in the sexuality space, researchers, and now I wanted to hone in on second wave feminists. So I Googled feminist plus NYC, and Betty's name was the first name that popped up in my search results. I could not believe that Betty Dodson lived in New York City. I thought she'd been living in San Francisco because she was bi-coastal in the 70s. So I called and I left a message and I dropped my 1 million download number and she called me right back. And we set up the time for the interview. I was so excited to meet Betty Dodson, and I showed up 3 days early. So here I am, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I roll into 121 Madison Avenue, and the door opened, and there was Eric. And he looked me up and down twice, and it was good. Eric was Betty's protector, and then he let me in. And I walk in the foyer. And if you take in a workshop, you know it's all windows with the 13 hooks on the left side. And you step down into the living room. And there, standing before me, was Betty Dodson. And she took my breath away. Not in a sexual love kind of way. It's just, here is this woman with spiky white hair, black Prada glasses. She's wearing a t-shirt of Rosie the Riveter, holding a magic wand, and black bike pants. And she's 80 years old. But the strength and the generosity and the warmth and at the same time the fun, the playful, smart, it was all there. And I kind of just introduced myself and we went in the back room. So as I'm setting up, she starts asking me technical questions. She says, "Are you good with technology?" And I say, "Yeah, of course. My background is technology. I'm a lawyer by trade." And she's like, "You're a lawyer?" So I could tell that struck a chord. And then she's like, "Do you know how to work a camera?" And I said, "Absolutely." So she sits down, I sit down, and I'm setting up her microphone. And then as soon as we go live, I say to her, I go, "Betty, here's 4 inches. Is that enough for Betty Dodson?" And she laughs. She goes, "Oh, let's see." And she goes, and she licks the microphone up. And instantly we had this energy between us. And then I knew if you're going to interview Betty Dodson, it better be interesting. So I said, I Googled you and I found 10 quotes attributed to you. And I want to know, did you say it? And do you still believe it? And the first one, she's like, "Fuck no, I never said that." And we're laughing and we're going back and forth. And then it gets political. And we're having this wonderful exchange about authoritarian regimes, the control of women. I just listened to the podcast again to refresh my memory for this recording. And everything Betty was saying was right on point with where we were going. You can judge a culture by how it treats its women. And she saw it coming. So we have this intellectual volley going. And it's fun. And it's sensual. And then it's political. And then at the end, I asked her, I said, "Betty, what's next for you? You're 80 years old. What's next? Is this it? Have you accomplished everything you wanted to accomplish?" And she said, "Every decade on that birthday, I form an intention. What do I want?" And she said, "This decade is showbiz." And I don't miss a beat. I'm like, "Well, you know how you could do it, Betty. We could start a YouTube channel and we could say we could do anything we wanted and we could create these shorts and then we can promote it and we can create a community." And we're going back and forth and back and forth. And it's such a beautiful moment because it's 2 women who are media independent meeting, magnifying each other's life, understanding the importance of sexual equality for women, the same goal. And we're coming together And Betty didn't miss a beat. All of a sudden she said, you know what? Put him there, girl. And she put her hand across the table. And I shook it. And she said, I think we just went into business. And we just roared in laughter. And that's how it was. It was so easy. And I think that's why everyone loved Betty so much. When you were with her, you were yourself. She saw you. And really, Betty Dodson was the first person in my life who saw me and appreciated me and valued me. And in that moment, all of my childhood trauma was healed. It's so powerful, and we can all do that with the women in our lives when we see them and we value them, not for what they look like, but for what they are, for their capacity. Betty looked at me and said, you have a quick mind. That's how we closed the interview. And I was speechless. No one had ever said that to me. I wanted to be smart. I went to law school and I graduated summa cum laude because I wanted people to know I was smart, but no one could see past the curves and the green eyes and the sex positive energy. But Betty did. I look back at that moment and I feel such gratitude because I got to spend 3 days a week, holidays, traveling all over the world, phone calls every day with Betty Dodson. And she was the greatest human being that ever walked the planet. And when she passed, it was COVID lockdown. And I was her healthcare proxy. And I had her power of attorney. And we had to get her in a facility, which was really hard because the medical community had really been laid out. And I had to close down the apartment because things started to go missing. And we had talked a lot about her death and what would happen. And I never anticipated a pandemic. I never thought I wouldn't be there holding her hand. So when someone you love dies alone, it never leaves you. And it really left me with this hole and this regret, this deep, deep regret that I felt. Because she didn't know what was going on at the end. She wasn't tracking, and I would call her and I would say, Betty, how are you doing? And everyone's asking for you. And we'd send flowers. The room was filled with flowers at one point. And she'd say, why isn't anyone coming to see me? And it broke my heart. And why aren't you coming to see me? And I wasn't allowed. It was that moment in time where they wouldn't let anyone in the hospitals. So after she passed, I brought all her things to my attic and I had stacks of journals. Betty kept a journal from 1943 to 2018. And I started going through them, waiting for Zoom clients. And I would put sticky notes and I picked out all these beautiful experiences in Betty, like how did she become Betty Dodson? It's all there, like a blueprint. It's beautiful. And I didn't look at anything after 1992. And I think it's because I didn't want to read the journal entries about me. I didn't want to think that I loved Betty more than she loved me. I didn't want to think that maybe it wasn't what I felt it was. And then finally, a few weeks ago, I decided to look through her journal from 2007 when we met. And I found this entry. My sex life with Carlin is intellectual. I do not want it to become physical because from experience, I know that puts an expiration date on it. And I want this one to be the last, to the end. I want to take this love affair to the end of my life without physical sex. This decade is about passing on my knowledge. Carlin is perfect for this. She is my scribe, my girl Monday through Friday, my granddaughter, my business partner, my teacher, and then she has just a list of words. partnership, relationship, love affair, sex buddy, daughter, favorite date, collaborator. And I've struggled with how to define our relationship. People always say, well, who was Betty? And, she's my business partner. She was my best friend. No. She was my mother I never had. No. It's so much more than that. When you are intellectually, emotionally, and physically connected to someone. And I realized, and Laura said this to me, she goes, Betty was your North Star. And I think that's it. It's like, it's perfect. And she was all of our North Star. She shone so bright and she went so high that she illuminated the path for all of us. This series is my love letter to Betty, my Valentine, and my goodbye. I wanted to share the beautiful moments, the insights, everything that I learned from Betty Dodson with you. So there'll be moments that are sad and moments that are funny and moments where I hope that you take it into your own life, that you learn something, that you expand and you grow. I had the honor of working with Betty Dodson for 15 years and seeing her off the planet. This is our story.